Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. So I wanted to make another video about the severe mental side of benzo withdrawal, psychiatric drug withdrawal, or adverse events, whatever you want to call it, drug damage. The mental aspect can be extremely difficult to navigate and to overcome and to live with. So if you are familiar with my story, you'll know that I took antidepressants for 7 years. I was rapid tapered by my doctor. I didn't know that there was any type of withdrawal syndrome associated with antidepressants. I started getting pretty bad mental symptoms right away, but I didn't associate it to quitting my antidepressants, again, because I didn't know that you could have any effects from stopping. And I thought, well, I tapered, so I'm gonna be fine. And my mental symptoms were mostly, at that time, intrusive thoughts. And they weren't just the random thoughts that can pop up every once in a while that I think most people have at some point in time. They were repeating in my mind all day long, and so they always had a harm theme. They were pretty disturbing, and it didn't matter what I was doing. I was constantly having these images in my mind that just would repeat and repeat and repeat all day long, from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. And it lasted for 6 months, and then I got reprieve out of the blue, and it lasted for about 7 months, where I felt like my mind was finally in more of a neutral, kind of calm, normal state. And I had other symptoms as well. Like I had other physical symptoms. I had, panic attacks. I had fatigue mixed with insomnia. I had really bad headaches. I had stomach issues. I had bouts of depression. I just looked really puffy and swollen. I never felt well in other ways also, but the mental was the most disturbing for me. So like I said, I kind of got reprieve overnight at the 6-month off mark, and it lasted for about 7 months. And during that time, I wasn't taking care of myself. I was continuing to take alcohol. I was taking stuff to sleep at night. I was taking over-the-counter medications. And I think now in hindsight, looking back, those things were limiting my ability to heal from this permanently, because then after 7 months of reprieve, my symptoms came back. My mental symptoms came back. One day it was over Easter weekend. And so I freaked out, but there was nothing I could do to stop them. And then they went on for another 2 years at that point. 18 months. And I just couldn't take it anymore at that point. So that was when I decided to reinstate my original antidepressant at a low dose. And I got akathisia, and then started the benzo use and the polydrugging. And then I was cold turkeyed off everything else that I tried. I was in the hospital a couple of different times, the ER, the psych ward. It's just this whole long story. And once I took benzos and came off that too quickly by the doctors and was polydrugged, my mental symptoms got even worse. And so I'm going to get into a little more detail about that. I know I've made another video about it, which got quite a few views, but I felt like in that video I was building up a lot to it, and I didn't really get to the symptoms until the end of the video. So I'm going to describe them in more detail here. So keep in mind that I'm about 80% recovered now. It's been almost 29 months since I stopped the benzos and the polydrugging drugs, since I was taking off those. So I've been completely psychiatric drug free for 29 months now. But the start of this journey, when I first quit my first antidepressant, started in April of 2018. So it's been over 5 years since this all started for me. And if you followed my story, you'll know that my mental symptoms were really extreme. So like I said, when I took the benzos and then came off the benzos and was polydrugged, and I was having adverse events to all of the different drugs I was taking, my mental symptoms got even worse. So meaning they sped up, they got faster, I got new intrusive thoughts, and then I started getting sensations along with those thoughts that my psychiatrists ended up calling or labeling somatic hallucinations. And they tortured me for a long time. So like I said, I've been off everything now for 29 months, and I've shared in other videos, I feel like I started to turn a corner at 21 months off everything. So that was in November of 2022 when I was 21 months off. And now I'm like almost 29 months off, and it's just been kind of windows and waves for the last 8 months, but much more windows than waves. And the mental affects me much less now. If I'm in a wave, I still will get several or all of these symptoms, but in a wave, did I say? In a window, it'll all be completely gone. And yesterday I had a full window. I didn't have any symptoms at all. So It's so hard for me to talk about the mental symptoms because when I talked about them on my old channel, I used to have a different channel, I would get comments of people saying, you know, you're mentally ill, you have psychological problems. And I know that's not true because I have all of the other neurological symptoms that come along with quitting benzos and getting polydrugged. And, you know, I have diagnoses of akathisia and movement disorder. And I have things like internal vibrations and burning brain and uncontrollable like muscle jerking and just a whole laundry list of symptoms. So it's not just the mental that I'll get still in a wave, it's this cluster of symptoms. And it's all neurological, and I've had that validated by doctors. It's not something that's, you know, strictly a psychiatric illness type of thing. So when I first came off antidepressants, like I said, I had repeating intrusive thoughts that would start from the moment I opened my eyes and would last all day until I went to sleep. So a lot of these revolved around self-harm, blood, death, all types of gore. But it was the most common thing that would repeat in my head was self-harm. So I would see these visions or images of myself, cutting my hands, my arms, my wrists, my neck. And they would just repeat and repeat and repeat. And it was so horrible. And I remember I would do anything to try to make them stop. I was taking all different kinds of supplements. I was doing every type of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy that I knew of. I was trying to do ERP, so exposure and response prevention, which is very commonly used with people with OCD. Nothing helped. Like I really am sure now at this point that it was a chemical thing that was going on in my brain. It was nothing that I was able to willfully stop. And so that is what came from my first initial antidepressant withdrawal. That was my main and worst enduring symptom, was that. And then when I reinstated, I had those same symptoms, but they were fast. So before they were just kind of looping kind of slowly throughout the day. And then when I reinstated, they started going really fast through my head. And it kind of shifted a little bit where I would have images of like an axe going through my head or something slicing through my spine, all types of harm, and anything you can think of with harm was going through my head really, really, really fast, you know, jabbing knives into my neck and just like blood spattering. And I remember having a pastor come to my house. I remember my extended family getting together and praying over me and anointing me with oil. And I went to 3 different churches to get whatever was in me cast out. And because I was convinced at one point that I had some type of demonic possession, evil spirits. I didn't know. It was driving me insane. And at the point I reinstated, it was October of 2020. And like I said, my initial coming off antidepressants was April of 2018. So I had been suffering with these repeating thoughts when I reinstated already for 2.5 years. And then when I reinstated, I reinstated to try to get them to go away because I had been told I had severe OCD that needed treatment with SSRIs. And because I had had success on citalopram for so long, I was convinced that I would be fine going back on it. So I went on a low dose, got akathisia, and then my thoughts sped up and changed, not themes, but changed sort of theme within a theme kind of thing. It was still always harm type of thoughts, but they were more severe and more violent. And then that was kind of through my whole reinstatement. And each drug that I tried, whether it was an SSRI, an antipsychotic, I would get differing and worsening thoughts. So I remember taking Prozac and I started having suicidal thoughts. And I took, I think it was either Seroquel or Luvox, where I was seeing faces and cloaked men and these evil grinning people. I don't know what they were, I don't know what was happening. It's also like hard to even think about now. And then I started hearing things too. And it wasn't where I was hearing voices per se, because I had several psychiatrists interview me about these thoughts that I was having. And I was very open about them, and they never called them voices. They were still more like intrusive thoughts, but they were really loud and really in your face, and I knew that they weren't real, and I knew that they weren't something outside of me. I knew they were happening in my own mind, but it was just horrible. So when it turned into audible or audio type of thoughts, it was shouting, evil type of screaming, gurgling, hissing, laughing. I would hear like this deep, scary, demonic, satanic sounding voice. Not here, I wasn't hearing it, but I would have audible thoughts, and it would either be screaming or saying things, or it was just horrible. And again, so that was kind of during my reinstatement when I was trying all these different drugs. The thoughts were getting worse, they were getting faster, they were changing themes. I would have multiple ones kind of layered on top of each other. And at that time, while I was taking all those different drugs, I was still on benzos, and benzos had helped at first, but then they were losing effectiveness and becoming paradoxical, and they were creating tremors and involuntary muscle jerking and movements and pulling and all these horrible physical dystonic movement disorder type symptoms. And then they pulled me off the benzos cold turkey when I landed in the hospital. And then I entered benzo withdrawal on top of everything. So it was already still the initial antidepressant damage, then the reinstatement adverse effects with I think 8 different drugs I took then the subsequent benzo withdrawal because I was cold turkeyed off Ativan after taking it every day for 3 months. All of this was prescribed, all of this was medically supervised. And so then once I came off benzos, then that was when things got their most severe. So I came off everything in February of 2021, and those first 6 months, I could barely function at all. And the intrusive thoughts were absolutely nonstop. And that was also when I started developing sensations, which were the most torturous things of all. So I would have the same repeating violent thoughts, and then I would also feel them. So if I had a thought of a knife being plunged into my chest, I would feel it. I would feel pain. I would feel the coldness. I would feel the sharpness. I would feel it. And then right after that, I would get an image of an axe going through my back. And I remember like I would be walking and I would actually physically react to it. It just gives me chills just talking about it now. And then it would be something going through my head, and I would be wincing, and I was completely out of my mind. Like I couldn't do anything because I was so in my head all the time. And then this is when I was put on disability, and thank God, like I could stop worrying about trying to make an income and have to work, because I could not work at that point, and just constant cortisol rushes, and like I would try to go to sleep and it was like a bomb would go off in my head, and I would have this jerking and jolting awake, and then the thoughts would start, and it was a nightmare beyond words. And it went on for so long. Like I said, I didn't turn a corner where I started getting proper windows from my mental symptoms until I was 21 months off. So that was November of 2022. And keep in mind, this all started in April of 2018. So that's 4.5 years of this. Thank God now I have, it's only an occasional thing now in a wave where I'll get 1 or 2 thoughts. They don't repeat anymore, and I don't wake up with them anymore, and they've stopped tormenting me. I don't have the sensations anymore. And the thing is too, is I would have the violent thought, I would have the physical sensation, and then my body would react. My muscle would jerk or pull back. Nightmare. It was such a nightmare. And the worst part is that it didn't matter what I was doing. It didn't matter if I was visiting with someone. It didn't matter if I was on the phone. It didn't matter if I was trying to watch something on TV, if I was trying to do something active. I could never, ever, ever get away from it. Never. And it just, being locked in your head like that is, I think, one of the worst forms of mental torture, or of torture, that can exist to a human. I don't know, like, I would rather be in pain. I would rather, like, any of the other symptoms that I experienced throughout, I mean, other than the akathisia and the movements, those were bad, and the frantic nature of those is bad. But the mental stuff is, And for me, like, it's just next level. And I don't know if it was part of the akathisia or just part of the general nervous system dysfunction, but it was torture. It was such torture. But I can say with confidence now that for the most part, it's gone for me. And thankfully, because and there was so many times when I was just like, I can't survive this for one more day, and it turned into me self-harming because I would just make it stop. I would bang my head against things and hit myself and bash my head into windows, and it was so bad but I just wanted it to stop. I just wanted it to stop. And nothing would make it stop. And that was the worst thing, because the doctors would say, well, you just have severe OCD and you're just hallucinating. You need an antipsychotic and you need an SSRI. But every time I would try one, it would just get worse and worse and worse. And the only thing that helped was benzos, and they only helped for 3 months, or 3 weeks, I mean. And then they went paradoxical, and then I was stuck on them and trying to microtaper, and ended up in the hospital where they cold turkeyed me and sent me into benzo withdrawal. And it was just, it's so hard to talk about, but I think it's really important, because I know there's a lot of people that are suffering from the mental parts. I mean, these drugs have black box warnings about the thoughts that they can cause, and I think if people truly knew the whole realm of what these drugs can cause, no one would ever take them. So I just wanted to share that. If you're suffering from the mental, you're definitely not alone, but I'm here to say that it does get better. I mean, for me, it got better, but my first withdrawal, like I said, I was still drinking and taking over-the-counter drugs and stuff to sleep. And I think now, since I quit the drugs the second time in 2021, I've really been careful with now. Now I feel like I'm becoming less sensitive, so I'm able to use some things like a steroid nasal spray if I have sinus inflammation, but for the longest time, I never used anything. I mean, I wouldn't even take a cough candy. I wouldn't use nail polish. I wouldn't use anything that had any type of chemical, or anything that was man-made, synthetic, that was produced by any type of pharmaceutical company. I mean, nothing. I didn't drink. I still haven't drank. I haven't had a drink in 28 months now, I think. So I think that was part of why I was able to get better. I mean, even talking about it still, it'll take me back there, but my mind doesn't start repeating like it did before. But hell on earth. And it's gotten a lot better, but you're not alone if you experience any of those type of things, thoughts, hallucinations. But I'm here to give you hope. So hopefully I did that.